You're listening to the Feel Good Astrology podcast with Louisa Tannermunson. To request your personal reading, go to feelgoodastrology.com.
Hey there, welcome to Pluto Through the Houses. I'm Louisa Tannermunson from Feel Good Astrology. And if you've listened in before, welcome back. If you're a new listener, learning how to explore your own Pluto in your chart, then welcome to my channel. So in this short podcast, I say short, but these have been getting longer and longer as I've gone through these houses. I've got more and more into the whole Pluto subject as I've gone through. It's really quite amazing. So in this shortish podcast, I'm going to share with you my thoughts about the unique strengths of Pluto in the position he's in, and the challenges that you might have, the challenges you might consider in terms of Pluto's connection to your own planets in your own chart. So for instance, for those of you that know their chart, who have looked at the position of Pluto, if you've got Pluto in quite benign and helpful and supportive aspects to other planets like sextiles and trines, you know you're going to have a very different reaction to Pluto being in your ninth house than you would if you had really difficult ones like squares and oppositions. So we're going to be exploring all of that. Now, Pluto is a planet that transforms our experience. There's no other way to put it, really. He's god of wealth, power, and the underworld. And if you would like to learn a bit more about Pluto from a mythological perspective, then please do listen into my Pluto and Aquarius podcast, because there's quite a good and lengthy description there. But anyway, Pluto shows us where we seek power, because to us, it feels like we are weak and vulnerable. You know, we all have a weakness and a vulnerability somewhere, and Pluto will exploit it, I think. It really pinpoints how we go about our life trying to safety-proof ourselves and our existence so that we don't fall victim to the things that we fear are going to happen. So Pluto can really show us where we've already experienced trauma and manipulation. It also shows us how we process our sexual prowess. It shows us our imbalance of control energies. And it also shows us those that might try and control us, secret enemies and real life enemies. You know, how do they show up? Pluto will show us. From a spiritual perspective, I think Pluto shows us what we've yet to yield to. So, you know, in many respects, when a Pluto challenge comes on in our charts, it's usually an unseen and outside power that's not really that related to us, but it just feels like a personal attack. And, you know, if we hear the call, often we can, you know, just let it go. You know, we realize that we might not be strong enough, and we might just yield. We might have a bit of humility. But for most people, and I include myself in this, when we get challenged by a Pluto transit or Pluto transiting something in our chart, we often stand up to it. We face it down, we front it out, because it represents a really core fear. And we feel like if we don't defend that fear or protect ourselves from it, that in some way we're going to be killed or crushed or destroyed, which is very much, you know, a Pluto energy. So yeah, it definitely shows us where we have something deep and painful to learn. But here's the thing, it also shows us where we are truly free and where we can find lightness and joy and all those great things. So let's bring on Pluto in the ninth house then. So let's bring out all of the keywords and themes associated with the ninth house. What is the ninth house about? So the first thing that I would really say about the ninth house is I always like to look at the polarities between the houses. So the third house and the ninth house are polar opposites, and yet they have a commonality, which is knowledge. And I think learning is another sort of shared polarity, and they have a different approach to doing it. So I also think it's what's known versus what's unknown, and the ninth house represents what's largely unknown. So the third house, just to recap, is the first facts we learn, our early community growing up, our early friends, our early school experience, how we communicate, and it's simple communication, you know, it's everyday communication, everyday learning, and it's very much what we know. You know, it's our grounding environment that we grew up in. The ninth represents everything outside of that space. that we don't know or we don't yet know. So it represents our higher self, our higher cause. It's the context, the third house is the facts, and the ninth house is your learning about the context that wraps all those facts in place, or the bigger picture. So it's small picture, big picture. Can't see the wood for the trees, that's all sort of related to the third and ninth house. So the ninth house is known astrologically to capture politics, spirituality, religion, political. I've said political, haven't I? Publishing. It's also adventure. It's also law. Everything that is a higher resonance than just simple facts and simple learning. It's not the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. It's like the being able to read Tolstoy and understand the higher context of it, So anyway, we have this sense of adventure, and we have this sense of questing. We have this sense that we are seeking out the unknown. It's like the Holy Grail. We are in a kind of hero's journey, trying to find out more, because all of a sudden we need to know more. We've outgrown our life. We've outgrown, our context of where we were. And now we've moved on. We need more views, more vistas, more understanding to keep us going on this onward journey. So, Pluto in the ninth is also a progression of Pluto in the eighth. In the Pluto in the eighth, if you've listened to it, you may know that, one of the lessons we're learning from the eighth is to stand for something less shady, less dark. We learn to throw off other people's expectations, and we have this new sense of clarity. It's like we've been freeing ourselves, on this quest to free ourselves from our past. We've recognized our own power. We've also recognized where our families have had power over us. And so as we arrive in the ninth, or on Pluto's journey, as Pluto's in the ninth house, he's learning to recognize that whilst power has been seen as a darkness, the ninth house seeks to bring that darkness into the light in many respects. So here we go. What are you seeking? Like, where are you seeking control and power in your life if you've got Pluto in the ninth house? Well, I think it's to be powerful in the messages that we share and the teachings. We're really born into a strong philosophy, that it could happen like this. You may well find with a ninth house Pluto, you're born into a strong philosophy, ethos, religion, spiritual point of view. There's a craving to read deeply, to know deeply, and to absorb the higher learning and the higher states of power that can come from being able to think outside of the context you were raised in. So, there isn't, when you're in the ninth, when you've got your Pluto in the ninth, you may have always known that you could have more power if you've got more knowledge. And so, it gives a powerful need to transform by having an interesting location, a new adventure, a new study. It's like a craving that, what you believe is where you have your power. And so this can fuel the desire to become religious or change your religious background, or to suddenly learn more about spirituality, like you've got a quest to answer all the questions of life. It may very well show up in your life as that there's a new political context. Maybe you're brought up one way and you might become a pioneer of that, but you may actually find that there is a new political thinking that takes over, and you realize the power in it, so it's all about power and information. I would say you might seek power by here's another version, because I really do think with Pluto there's two sides to every coin. There are some people that go with the power that was imposed upon them and improve upon it, and then there are those that say, that power stops here, mate. I'm not going to put that onto the next generation, or I'm not going to live by those rules. I'm going to find my own power. And the funny thing is, either way, you get stuck on the power. And the way to liberate yourself from all of that is to realize that everything changes and that there is no one truth. Like, there is no core one truth, one core reality. That it's all subjective. But, very few people get there. I myself certainly haven't got there. And I might get there and then realise that that's not the truth either. I was actually having a conversation with somebody just last week with a good coach friend who is quite an awakened being, and he was describing like the next peeling of the onion that he'd got to. And I was like, how do you know that is the actual core truth? So, you know, very sort of like Pluto in ninth conversation we had. Anyway, so you may well find that like having Pluto in the ninth for you was you seek power by avoiding being changed or transformed by somebody's religion and way of thinking. So you might actually have an aversion to being proselytized to, you know. So there might be an avoidance of learning because it might take you outside of where you're comfortable. And this actually feels very much like Pluto in the third house. Again, the polarities really work quite strongly here, you know. So you might not want the greater power because it will take you away from what you already know. You also might not want the greater power, and you might avoid having that extra power because it takes you closer to being rejected by your society or the adherence to what you were told. It's all about beliefs and information. You could be also caught in cycles of self-righteousness and absolute certainty that what you seek is the only truth. And of course, you know, you might evangelize your truth, you know, to maybe like shame people or to help people or to help hopefully expand people. You know, you may well find that you go through courses, books, lessons, sermons, missionary work, and so on and so forth. The ninth house is very much about higher education. So you may well find that, you know, with Pluto in your ninth, that you've got this addiction to higher education, and you may well get to the top of your calling that way. You could even search the most important contextual truth of everything, and it could actually lead you to that enlightenment that I was speaking about. But either way, it would lighten you up, hopefully. Now, what do you fear by having Pluto in the ninth house? Well, I think it's, you know, the inability to explore. You know, you might be fearful that you'll be stopped from exploring. Also, you might be afraid of exploring. You might be afraid of knowing, but you also might be afraid of not knowing. You might be, and this is really quite real, you might be afraid of losing your mind. And, you know, how could you survive without having your mind full of action? Here's an example. This is actually my mum. My mum's got her Pluto in the ninth, and her mother was a migrant. And in my mother's early life, she was taken to live in, you know, the whole family moved to another country with another culture, another language, a completely different weather system. And while she was there, one of her sisters was dropped on her head and had a massive illness, and kind of didn't lose her mind as such, but wasn't able to function in the same way. So, you know, in that, my mum's her fears might have come up that being outside of her usual environment and being in a strange country had led to this really serious occurrence in her programming. And, you know, another ninth house Pluto thing, you know, her mum was a migrant, and so she's quite possibly grown up with some of those fears of what it's like to be in another country. She could see what it was like for her mum, being in a country, learning a new language, learning a whole new set of cultural norms. So, you know, that's another way that the ninth house Pluto has been expressed through her chart. So it can happen on so many different levels. What do you really need to learn, you know, from having Pluto in the ninth? Well, it might be to find the higher power in you without needing the power of knowing it. You know, it might lead to some actual real power rather than having power because of what you know. And who's causing you pain? Who might be an enemy, because Pluto can show us, you know, us enemies. Well, it could be people that are rejecting your knowledge or people who are throwing knowledge at you. So again, it's two sides of the same coin. How do you find freedom? I think it's you're not your knowledge or beliefs. It's letting go of everything that you know and accepting that there's only truth in the moment, felt and experienced through your senses. I mean, that's the only thing we can really truly know. I mean, we talk about all sorts of things, you know, as cultural fact, because people outside of ourselves have proven things, and we take these provings especially if quite a few people have proved it. But again, unless we're seeing the provings and unless we've experienced it ourselves, how do we know that what somebody is saying, this is how it is and this is how it is actually how it is? We really don't know. We can have an idea, but we really don't know. And so all of those kind of games to do with power and authenticity come in. If your Pluto is well connected to the other planets, then you've probably got strength to influence others in a really beneficial way. So you could actually end up being quite an influencer, being, a top lecturer. You could be at the top of your game. You could have the strength to set up learning and teaching, and you could end up traveling. There's a lot of power in moving and expanding. The 9th house is traditionally associated with Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. And Sagittarians are known as, searching for the truth. They're absolutely searching for adventure, and they're nearly always expanding in some way. So all of that is coming in. You've probably got the ability to cut away from the past and move somewhere unknown. A lot of people with something strong like Pluto in the 9th could end up emigrating. So I see that's really what's going on if you've got easy connections to Pluto. If you've got difficult ones, you might fear a philosophy or system taking you over. So here's an example that I think is quite real and would absolutely strike up some intrinsic fear with people with Pluto in the 9th. So like right now in 2023, and has been going on for quite a few years now, but there are lots of diverse, polar opposite philosophies coming onto the world arena, and the narratives that are spewed by MSM. So there is this fear of a philosophy taking you over. So if you fear MAGA, or if you fear like a woke philosophy, you may well fear living under one of these political and semi-religious regimes. The way these different ways of thinking are portrayed by the MSM is to bring up fears. And if you've got the sort of Pluto in the 9th, you may well actually have a real fear of what life would be like if these people were in control. And I sort of deliberately kind of said MAGA versus woke, because that's how I see the two extremes are being played out. And it's not to say either is wrong. It's just, we have fears about something taking over us, or kind of crushing who we are and saying this is how it really is. It's almost like we're reinstalling an operating system, that both of those, as they're said or portrayed from different sides of the media, it's almost like they represent an operating system, like a way of thinking, which may or may not be true. Who knows? So, I think, if you've got a square opposition with your your Pluto in the 9th, then you really are being called to stay balanced in your truth and to see beyond and outside of these positions. Of course, it's okay to, be one way or the other, or to be a libertarian, or to identify with something, because the whole 9th house area is really about beliefs. So it's normal for us to identify with something. What I'm talking about here is, how do you find freedom from that? It's probably not. You might find some initial freedom in having your philosophy or your political beliefs that are currently serving you. And, with Pluto in the 9th, at some point, you'll probably find that what's serving you now is not going to serve you in 10 years' time, or 11 years' time, or 100 years' time. At some point you're going to have to, or you may choose to try and free yourself completely of the controls of belief. So I hope I've kind of, sort of described it to its fullest. And if you think it'd be useful to unpack this in a small online group, like a little study group, then please do get in touch. It's louisatannermunson@gmail.com. Now, if you've got Pluto going through the 9th, then a lot of these things are coming up. But what's more prescient is that right now it just looks like there's a whole new way of seeing your world. Like the operating system you've already got all of a sudden feels a bit too small for you. And it's like, crikey, there must be something better. And so you may have this new position, and it may have really taken root as a new political, philosophical, religious way of thinking. It's like somebody who all of a sudden becomes born again, or, who adopts a whole new way of being. So this could in itself create a new trap or prison for you. It could bring you masses of relief. And at the same time, when you put all of your energies into one way of being, it starts to contravene the laws of nature. And the laws of nature is that everything is possible, like plants. If you look at plants growing, they have flexibility within them. And the moment they start to get rigid, they start to desiccate, they start to lose water, and they start to lose strength. And I really do see that with the ninth, the ninth. And this is one of the problems with Sagittarius, anyone, like the ninth is represented, or, it's associated with the sign of Sagittarius. And one of the problems with Sagittarius, if you hear people bashing Sagittarians, is that they get very dogmatic in their views. They can be really righteous and believe that this is the only way. They can get kind of arrogant with it. And of course, the moment you get rigid in your belief systems, you start to wither, because your belief systems can only take you as far as they can go. And at some point, something new comes in. It's the whole process of evolution. So, if you've got Pluto going through your ninth, all of this is happening. And you may find that by the time Pluto's gone through your whole ninth system, that where you found one way of thinking, like you had a new upgrade in your system, you might find by the time Pluto leaves, you've had another two ways of thinking, massive ways of thinking. Because funnily enough, when you go through one shift, you're more likely to have another and another, because at least you're open to shifting your perspective. And, people that don't have a shift at all are unlikely to shift, You want to also watch the motives and truth of those who are teaching you as well, because, Pluto shows us enemies and hidden enemies, and it's quite Machiavellian. And so you might actually be taken in by a new, magnetic, powerful guru or teacher or political movement. So you could get completely lost in someone else's magnetism. You might also just study hard, like, your way of doing the Pluto in the ninth might be to absolutely embark on finding out everything that you can about a particular subject. You could become the most powerful teacher of your preferred subject at this time. And so it's like a time of deep immersion and research. So what is your big learning here if it's going through the ninth? I would say that you can learn transcendence in this position. You could even find enlightenment. You could let go of all positioning and let go and release all beliefs and go into a space of divine knowing in the moment. But most likely, you're just lightening up a bit and finding out what your truest gift to humanity is. So I hope that's helpful. And if I can be of any further help, then just drop me a line or go to my website, www.feelgoodastrology.com. But yeah, thanks for joining me here today, and maybe I'll catch you in another session. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Feel Good Astrology podcast with Louisa Tanner-Munson. To request your personal reading, go to feelgoodastrology.com.